Welcome to another Dividend Bear video. I hope that you will be thrilled about that one, since it is quite the hot topic. The Russia-Ukraine war was probably the reason your feed is filled with tanks, soldiers, and famous leaders. Since this war is being waged heavy on economical battlegrounds, our team decided to break down the things that matter, the ones you do not see on the news. However, before we march forward, let's do a quick recap of the situation we're diving into. During the last 2 decades, the Russian state has engaged in a rather aggressive politic of hand-twisting, blackmailing and demagogy, and it was all a desperate attempt to regain its status as a world power, which they lost with the fall of the USSR. Putin comprehends very well the fact that Russia is faced with major problems such as high corruption and demographical issues which, in all honesty, he caused. The leadership has turned Russia from a progressive economic powerhouse into something that has a higher rich per divide than most third-world nations, and Putin, being the mentally aspiring mad lad he is, falls back on the same old tried and tested distraction method as every other Russian dictator before him, which is to randomly declare war on something. The annexation of Crimea, the Donbass and Luhansk conflict, Putin's love for Muslims, all have something in common: people are involved. In fact, millions of them. And how do 1 million people contribute if not with taxes at least? While there is a coherent reason behind this conflict, the fact that Russia is a country that spends as much money as anything else, chest-thumping itself with memes across the internet, trying to prove itself as a major military power to 12-year-olds for no reason other than to try and convince its own populace that it's still a major world superpower and not a comedically dying influence in world politics. Over the course of this chaotic war, where the other side presents video game segments as combat footage and blatantly adopts Twitter bullshit to make itself look good, Putin has called his own bluff. His professional army is not capable of holding an attack line hundreds of kilometers long, which led to major losses, both in the strategical department and in the manpower sector. That fact led to the recently announced mobilization, which affects on the Russian economy we are going to discuss today. Now that we have traced back the cause of this major global conflict, I would like to know how many of you are aware of it? Please let us know in the comments section, and feel free to add more information. Officials in the West have long anticipated that any attempt by the Kremlin to fuel the war would spark demonstrations in Russia, and this is exactly what happened. Following Putin's declaration, the majority of the Russian soldiers sent to Ukraine so far come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and outlying areas of the nation, calling up individuals with prior military experience allows the Kremlin to avoid enlisting the sons of the urban elite, those most likely to cause a reaction against a war that the majority have backed until recently. Let's not forget the fact that 80+% of Russia's population is allocated in its European part. Let us start with the matter at hand. First, this mobilization is not a mass one, similar to the one the Soviet Union did in 1941, and it is not going to be even close to the 10% drafting, which most of the countries did in World War II. Russia simply cannot afford one like that socially and economy-wise too. That is why Putin waited so long with the announcement of such measure of last resort. Shoigu said that only reservists will be mobilized and stated the number 300,000, which is an interesting one. The official data states that Russia's reserve force is numbering 2 million people, and compared to that, the announced draft of 300,000 men seems to be an easily achievable goal. But do not get fooled by the quick math, for mobilization is one very expensive and complex on an economical basis endeavor. I will give you something to think about. The annual cost of one Russian footman goes beyond $80,000. When one adds the heavy machinery, logistics cost, high-tech, planning, unpredicted circumstances, you will get the astronomical number of $15.5 million per hour. Mobilization will not ease that hardship, not at all. It will only put an additional pressure on the fragile Russian economy, which is taking large hits from the sanctions imposed by Europe, USA, and the Western world in general. Time is money, and money is time. This so often used Benjamin Franklin quote summarizes extremely well the dire financial situation Russia is throwing itself into with an obligatory mobilization like that. Training and refresher courses cost time and money. The process is simple but costly. In the first month, Russia might be sending 30,000 servicemen at most, and for that number to reach the desired figure of 300,000, it would take up to 1 year. Putin also called for mobilization of industry, which would be a complete suicide and will definitely ignite additional social unrests. With the sanctions that block 40% of the Russian economy, the gas and oil exports, Putin shot himself in the leg with this announcement, which now seems like the biggest gamble he has ever made. In the Russian provinces of Vladivostok, Kirov, Voronezh, Chuvashia, and Bashkiria, volunteer battalions have already been organized, according to unsubstantiated claims from Ukrainian media. The BAR's reserves unit is looking for individuals with military experience between the ages of 25 and 63, according to a statement made by Vladivostok officials on September 16. The notion that Europe will submit to his invasion of Ukraine due to its disproportionate reliance on Russian energy will go down in history as Russian President Vladimir Putin's catastrophic error of judgment. Moreover, overdependence affects both directions. Europe relied on Russian gas and oil, but Russia was strongly dependent on the European energy market. If Russia were a company, it would be in financial straits. Moscow has been building pipelines to Europe for years. The much ballyhooed Siberian pipelines to China that Putin promised before the conflict are still years away from being built. Such projects will also be unfeasible after the war due to Western sanctions and the widespread migration of oil and gas businesses from Russia in opposition. As a result of Putin's coercion and price shock ploys, which have caused terrible price increases, inflation, and the destruction of its credibility as a trustworthy provider, post-war Europe will completely sever its ties with Russian energy. In terms of supply, Germany is once again using its own coal. Nuclear power plants in France and Germany will be expanded or taken out of storage, and in a few years, liquefied natural gas from the United States, North Africa, Central Asia, and the Middle East will completely replace Russian gas. Due to the Kremlin's primary focus on mobilization and military operations, funds allocated by the government will be used for these programs rather than investments in the industry and economy. Investment returns are going to start falling down quickly, and before the year is through, the Moscow Stock Exchange may even close below 1,500 points. In the medium run, the financial repercussions of mobilization will be even higher than those of the conflict in Ukraine. The economic effects will be severe in Russia's poorest areas, such as Buryatia, where thousands of people will lose their source of income. Small and medium-sized local enterprises would simply disappear. Wow, wasn't that one long talk? It was actually quite fulfilling to learn all of this information. I guess war in general poses big threats not only to the countries in conflict, but it also has a global impact on global stock, which could lead to inflation, stagnation, and recessions. Also, there are millions of affected innocent people all around the world. Make sure you like the video and smash that subscribe button. Oh, and if you have encountered anyone calling for donations or help, please do not hesitate.